So for this project, I wanted to talk about the adaptations of It by Stephen King, but mainly I wanted to talk about it as an evil entity, the forms that it takes, and how it hunts its prey in each adaptation specifically. So the first adaptation is going to be the novel. So it was published September 15th, 1986, and it was Stephen King's 22nd book, but his 17th under his real name, because King used a pen name of Richard Bachman for a couple of his novels. So the novel is comprised of two timelines, with our main cast of characters switching between their childhood selves and their adult selves. And it was written in third person omniscient, and almost every character from the novel at some point has some sort of point of view. So whether it was a couple sentences talking about some of their thoughts, or it was whole chapters, each character had a little bit of something to their point of view. The second set of adaptations is the miniseries. It was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and it was adapted by Lawrence D. Cohen. It released on TV from November 18th to the 20th, 1990, and it debuted as two episodes, each episode switching from our main cast, childhood selves, and their adult selves. And each episode was about an hour and a half long, so it was basically two movies. And at the time of its release, it was ABC's biggest success of 1990, and it ended up pulling in 30 million viewers for both episodes, which was a big hit. So the third adaptations I want to talk about is It's Chapter 1 and 2. So both movies were directed by Andy Muschietti, Chapter 1 being released on September 8th, 2017, and Chapter 2 being released on September 6th, 2019. Chapter 1 was focused on the childhood experience of our main cast, while Chapter 2 was focused on their adult counterparts, but Chapter 2 did have a lot of flashbacks from their childhood selves. And at the time of the first chapter's release, it became the third highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, and then when it was unadjusted for inflation, it then became the highest grossing horror film of all time. Getting into the actual novel, we have the origin of It as a character. So, before the universe, there was It, and it was along with the turtle, which is its enemy, but we won't really talk about the turtle. But when the turtle created the universe, it came down to Earth and it settled in a place to make its home, which it ended up being Derry. So it came down and was described as like a meteor, but not. And it held it. And when Mike saw it in the vision, he described it as looking as the Ark of the Covenant from the Bible, but instead of having God inside, it had it. And you could feel the evil seeping out of this meteor. And when it came down, there was an explosion that set everything on fire. And the meteor was described as a bundle of lightning and thunder, and it was loud. And it was so loud that they described that it thought it was going to bust their eardrums out. And in all of the adaptations, it's been stated that it has been in Derry since essentially the beginning of time, the creation of the universe. And before the universe was created, it was living in the macroverse. So the forms that it takes. So it has the ability to shapeshift from its actual form into what it deems necessary in the moment. Like, it will change into the Pennywise the Clown form when it's hunting, and then when it meets its prey, it turns into what its prey fears. But its true form is described as spider-like, but we'll get into that later. So here's just a small list of what it can turn into. So we have the clown, which is its main form in all the adaptations when it's been viewed. It can turn into a leper, birds and insects, an eyeball. Um, there's a werewolf, mummy form, and the figures and paintings. And then it can turn into other people like Georgie and then Ben's dad. And then my personal favorite is the moon, the embodiment of it. Its true form is indescribable by the human mind, but the closest that the losers get to an accurate description is a spider form. Its true form resides in the deadlights in the macroverse. So the deadlights are these orange lights that hold energy from the macroverse. They are what it is essentially made of and its life essence. And looking into the deadlights blinds its victims and robs them of their conscious minds because the human mind cannot comprehend them. It can leave a victim insane and immobile as well. So it's basically like staring into oblivion and infinity. It makes you go crazy. The macroverse is a space outside of the universe where it originally came from. When Bill and Richie look into the deadlights in their attempt to defeat it, it throws their spirit into the macroverse where they're able to see everything outside of the universe. And when Bill was by himself in the macroverse as a child in the novel, he met the turtle, Maturin, who told him how to kill it and told him that he had the ability to kill it. How it hunts. So in the novel, we get an understanding that its prey doesn't have to be afraid in order for it to feed on it. Fear just makes the victim tastier. It also needs to be in a physical form to feed. In the chapter's adaptation, we hear Pennywise say multiple times when it's about to eat the kids, tasty, tasty fear. And it will go to great lengths in order to make them afraid before killing them, which ultimately really leads to its demise. In the miniseries, Pennywise really likes to taunt the kids more than instantly make them afraid. We see it taunting Eddie in the bathroom rather than it really scaring him. We also see Pennywise just goading their adult counterpoints with a picture of Georgie and then showing up in the hotel to make fun of them. And it feeds to gain power to be power. It wants to be the ultimate being, and it wants to be better than the turtle, who it hates, and better than the other, which is this figure that is talked about multiple times in the book, but we don't really get a description of it. But there was a quote on page 891 of the books where Bill is reflecting on the fight with it when they were children and how they almost defeated it. And he's talking about just how they felt powerful when they were fighting it. And it says, one night as he was falling asleep, the rain a steady lulling patter on the roof and against the windows, it occurred to him that there was another question, perhaps the only question. It had some real shape. He had nearly seen it. To see the shape was to see the secret. Was that also true of power? Perhaps it was, for wasn't it true that power, like it, was also a shape changer? It was a baby crying in the middle of the night. It was an atomic bomb. It was a silver slug. It was the way Beverly looked at Bill and the way Bill looked back. Exactly what was power anyway? And that just really depicts the role of power in this series. So now I'm going to talk about the ways that Pennywise went after our main cast, preying on their fears and how it hunted to the children, just so you can kind of get a real embodiment of what it did. So for Bill, in every adaptation of it, it comes to Bill in the form of Georgie or in the clown form. He never sees anything other than that. And Pennywise preys on Bill not necessarily with a fear of his, more so just the guilt that he holds over Georgie's death, because he believes that he's the reason his brother is dead. The closest Pennywise gets to scaring, specifically Bill, is in the book. When Pennywise uses Georgie's picture book, blood appears on his pages and Georgie's school picture vanishes, and that's the only time that it's really preying on his fear. Since Pennywise doesn't necessarily need its victim to be fearful, he uses Bill's guilt to attempt to immobilize him, which ultimately fails once Bill puts his guilt over Georgie aside. So for Richie, in the book and the miniseries, Pennywise comes to him as the teenage werewolf. However, Richie only sees the werewolf one time in the miniseries, while he encounters it multiple times in the book, by himself as well as with Bill. The werewolf is a lot more physical in the book than in the miniseries, and in the miniseries, it just kind of is standing there and growling at him, but while in the book, he makes physical contact with Richie, like ripping his shirt open, scratching his back open, stuff like that. But in the chapters, it just appears as the clown, and Richie states that his fear is clowns in the first chapter. I personally think they did this for the reveal of Richie being gay and his fear is manifesting as the clown knowing and telling his secret. But there is a nod to the werewolf in chapter 1 when Ben gets his stomach slashed open in knee bolt. It's a werewolf claw that cuts him open. Eddie, in every adaptation, Eddie's a germaphobe, and he's scared of really anything that'll get him sick, so Pennywise uses this to scare him in many ways. In the novel and in both chapters, Pennywise comes to Eddie in the form of a leper, which is the epitome of germs. In the miniseries, Pennywise appears in the locker room drain when Eddie is taking a shower at school because he's scared of taking a shower at school from all the germs. But throughout all the adaptations, Eddie is prone to freezing when he's faced with danger or is scared, so Pennywise is for sure preying on Eddie's weakness in order to kill him, mostly by that freezing factor. Beverly, in every adaptation, it uses her fear of blood and her father to go after her, but it mostly appears to her in the form of the clown. So her fear of blood is a representation of her being afraid of getting her period and becoming a woman due to the physical and sexual abuse that her father inflicts on her. And the miniseries is the only adaptation that never shows her being abused in this way, but it does heavily imply it. In the case of a lot of sexual abuse victims, specifically female sexual abuse victims, they fear going through puberty because they think it will make them even more desirable to their abuser, and Beverly is clearly undergoing that, especially in chapter 1. She also sees her father's face on its body in chapter 1 when the kids are fighting it at the end of the movie, and it becomes her father to make her freeze so that he will be able to kill her, but it doesn't work, so good for her. With Mike, he has a different fear in just about every adaptation. So in the book, it comes to Mike in the form of a giant prehistoric bird, and we end up finding out that the bird has shown itself to his father as well. And this fear of birds stems from Mike being poked by a crow as a baby, so it's preying on that fear from him being small. In the miniseries, Mike's fears never are shown in this adaptation. However, we do get his interaction with the losers while looking at his father's picture book. So Pennywise shows up in the book as the clown, but never as Mike's outright fear. And in the chapters, Pennywise uses Mike's fear of seeing his parents burn up in a fire in order to scare him, and it uses their voices screaming at Mike to help incapacitate him because as a child he did see his parents burn up in a fire. Ben is another character that has a different fear in every adaptation. So in the book, Pennywise appears to Ben as the clown in the sewers, and he even goes as far as offering him a balloon, which Ben almost takes. But when he realizes what's happening, Pennywise turns into a mummy, which Ben is ultimately afraid of, and that scares him off. In the miniseries, Pennywise appears to Ben as his dead father, who is trying to lead him into the sewers. But when Ben gets scared, his father disappears and his skeleton emerges from the frozen lake that's in front of him, and it tries to pull him in the water, which I think is fucked up. But in the chapters, Pennywise appears to Ben as a headless boy that Ben saw in a dairy history book who was killed in the ironworks explosion, and I think this was just used because it was what he was looking at and it kind of showed that he was scared. So with Stan, in the novel and the miniseries, Stan is lured to the standpipe while he's bird watching, which is just like a building, and he ends up being locked inside, and he starts hearing the voices of the dead ones, which end up being the children that drowned in the standpipe. And they ended up coming after him, but he ultimately gets away. But in the chapters, Pennywise appears to Stan as a painting of a woman in his father's office, him finding that picture terrifying, and he refuses to look at it when he walks by. This womanly figure appears to him multiple times and even bites his face, so this is one of the only times in the any of the adaptions that it makes physical contact with one of the children. How it is defeated. So the ritual of Chud is mentioned in every adaptation as a way to kill it, which it's essentially a battle of wits, and whoever lasts longer wins. In the novel, Bill and Richie are able to engage with it telepathically after looking into the deadlights, and they make it weak by saying phrases and voices that give them power, like Richie using his Irish cop voice and Bill saying the phrase, he thrusts his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghost because that's what got him over his stutter. So Eddie is able to wound it with his aspirator because he believes that it's powerful, but he's killed, and it runs away, and which brings Bill and Richie out of the deadlights, but they're able to kill it, and they make the final kill with their love for each other, the belief that they are powerful, and childhood nostalgia with the help of the other. Once it is weak enough, Bill crushes his heart, and it finally defeats it. In the miniseries, it was defeated using the power of the silver slugs, which Beverly is able to hit the deadlights, and it almost mortally wounds it. And Beverly is able to use this weapon of power, bravery, and unity that the kids have for one another. And then once wounded, the losers beat the shit out of it, and it ultimately kills it with the power of friendship. In chapter 2, boiled down, it's defeated by being bullied to death. In this adaptation, the big focus point is a phrase from the novel that all living things must abide by the laws of the shape they inhabit. And since it takes the form mostly of a clown, they're able to bully him down from his spider form to a small little baby clown by throwing his other forms in his face. And bullying convinces it that it's small, therefore it becomes small. And it's defeated not only by bullying, but the unity of the losers, their love they have for each other, and their friendship. So it all comes down for the way that they love and care for one another. So to finish this presentation off, this is a little bit of bonus content. So I made this meme after I finished the chapter 2 movie, and I just thought it was silly because when I went and saw it in theaters, I was like, what do you mean they killed it by bullying? It was just, it was something. It was a choice. And then to finish this off, this is just a couple of choices that each director, writer made in each adaptation that I really thought was a choice. So in the book, The Kid Orgy, I'm not gonna talk about that. It's just that was a choice that was made. Yeah. But also Pennywise turning into the moon, that was just something that I was like, okay. So in the miniseries, does Pennywise own a printer? Like, why was he printing off pictures of Georgie and printing off pictures of saying, like, I'm gonna kill you? Another one is Ben making out with Pennywise. That was a choice. That was a choice. Um, and then Virgin Eddie and getting rid of Myra when it's so integral to the plot that Eddie marries his mom, essentially. Why'd they get rid of her? And then I kind of understand why they were like, okay, Eddie has never loved anyone as much as he loved the losers, but like, why did you make him a virgin? It's so weird. And then just the power of friendship killed it. That was, like, I get it, but okay. And then in the chapters, I just thought it was a really odd choice of making Beverly a slut because that's not in any other adaptation. I just thought that was a little weird. Another one is Bill shooting his brother in the head. I thought that was so fucked up when I saw it, and I was like, okay. And then the last one is just Pennywise is defeated by being bullied to death. Just kind of like, what are you talking about? Okay.